Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Well, there have been a lot of developments in the city of Joplin this past year, and today we're getting a chance to follow up on those and to visit with city manager Sam Anselm. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Judy.
And I'd like to welcome you, our first interview as city manager for you.
Thanks.
And guys, start off with that, your feelings about having the position now as city.
It's exciting, you know. I've spent my career in public service, and having an opportunity to kind of have that interim label removed, I think, gives me some opportunity and some challenges ahead, but I'm excited to be able to move forward and have that put behind us so we can plot on ahead.
Great. Well, you mentioned your career in public service. People are perhaps a little bit interested in your background. How does someone get interested in public service in the first place?
I was in 8th grade when the Bush-Dukakis debates were going on. I remember sitting in my living room just watching that debate on television and thinking, government sounds kind of cool. So went through high school, enjoyed, was on student council and did the typical high school, student government type of stuff, and then went to college, spent my first year at University of Texas, Arlington, and decided I was going to major in political science and possibly be a politician one day, run for House of Representatives or Senate or whatever the case may be. But I think the intro to government class down there had probably 450 kids in it, and I thought that's just a little too big for
Everybody
me.
wants that same goal, right?
Right. Yeah. So we decided, my girlfriend, who is now my wife at the time, we decided we'd go ahead and relocate. We wanted to get a little bit closer to home. I grew up in St. Charles County area. Wentzville, where my grandfather was the town marshal up there. So wanted to get back closer to home, so we actually enrolled at Northwest Missouri State. So sorry, but,
right?
Go Bearcats. If there's a good side, I mean they're
still the same conference, right?
Their football team didn't get good until the year I graduated, so they were 0-12, I think, the '98, the year we graduated from Northwest, and then they went and started winning national titles. But anyway, so that was enrolled up there and still kind of thought political science, but then they had a public administration program that I kind of learned a little bit more about, and that was more of the behind the scenes, not the policy implementation side.
It was running the government.
Running the government instead of actually, setting the policies and being the politician type stuff. And it sounded interesting to me, so stuck that out. And then graduated from Northwest, got a job with the city of St. Peters, Missouri as an intern right out of college, and then transitioned that into a full-time position in their purchasing department. Went to grad school at University of Missouri, St. Louis, again in public policy. Graduated from there in 2002, and then spent almost a decade at St. Peters, and then in 2008 decided to move out of the organization to move up and kind of advance my career. So went and worked for the city of Ferguson for 3 years until 2011 when I came down here.
In the Joplin. So you've been involved in behind the scenes of government. There's a lot of people, they look at city government, county government, whatever level, they don't realize probably what really happens to make that government work.
It's fun. I mean, people think, especially in a college, I want to go into accounting, and I want to go into science, I want to go into this, but I mean, local government especially has an opportunity for a lot of students to advance, their careers and their interests. I mean, our wastewater treatment, plant, for example.
Environmental science, right?
A lot of biology, a lot of sciences there involved. I think our superintendent has a couple of master's degrees in chemistry and biology and stuff. So I mean, it's pretty amazing what you can apply your skills and your interests for in the field of local government itself. And that's what I find most exciting about it is it's not just making widgets all day. And I spent summers in college working for General Motors at a parts distribution plant. So doing the same thing day in and day out certainly has its pros and cons, but that's not what I wanted to do. I like the challenge of having a different problem to solve every day, and that's what I enjoy most about public service.
And do you find that now in the city of Joplin that every day is different when you walk in the door?
Yeah, I mean, you can put together any agenda you want to put, and here's what I'm going to accomplish, this today, and then you get a phone call at 8:30 from a resident or from a council member who has a concern, and it just kind of derails your plan for that day. But again, you're working on problems that people have, and I like to be able to help in whatever way I can to help solve those. So it's rewarding.
You mentioned people and working with the citizens, and especially city government. You are the level of government where people interact with most. Perhaps they're not going to call their congressman as much, or they're not going to deal with even their state representative. But if they see something wrong with their street, they're going to call you.
I mean, Tip O'Neill, he said it when he was Speaker of the House in the late '80s. I mean, all politics is local, and you can replace politics with the word government, and all government is local. That's where residents have the most opportunity to have the biggest impact on their daily lives from a government interaction perspective. So, yeah, I mean, you could call your congressman, whether it's a representative or senator up in D.C., and you might, be fortunate to get a response, but you can call your council member and get a much more quick response to an issue that you're having, and then it's the back end, behind the scenes stuff that call generates where all the magic happens. So.
And when you look at even a city government like Joplin, you provide so many services for the citizens. I mentioned roads, you mentioned the sewers, and just your day-to-day life, you are dealing with the citizens.
Police, fire, a lot of internal operations, human resources, finance, accounting, state audits, just anything that comes along, comes across your desk on any given day is there's definitely a variety there.
So when you work with your staff, is that something you keep high in your mind, that we are here serving the citizens?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I cut my teeth in an organization, again, St. Peter's, who had a very customer service driven culture. And, we exist at the end of the day to serve our residents and what their needs are. I want to do that with as minimal disruption as I can. So, I want to work as hard as we can. And I hope our staff would work as hard as they can to stay as far out of the lives of our residents as we can. So there's a pothole, hopefully we can get that patched in 24 or 48 hours so that issue isn't, weighing on that resident's mind for a week from now. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to improve the way we handle our operations within the organization, but ultimately the goal is to serve and benefit our residents.
So is communication a key aspect of that?
Absolutely. Probably 95% of my job is communication and, making sure that the expectations and the goals are being communicated clearly, and then probably 95% of the problems result whenever there's that lack of communication. So it's by and large the most important factor.
Well, as city manager, people might ask, well, how do you describe your role in relation? You mentioned the elected council members and the staff and the structure of the city. How do you define that role?
There are a lot of different forms of government. I mean, you have some strong mayoral forms, typically in the South and the East, and somewhat on the West Coast as well, but where the mayor is a full-time paid position elected to actually run the city. Council manager forms of government are different. Typically your mayors are part-time positions, but they're looking for that professional who has the education and the experience then to come in and run the organization. So a public administration degree is pretty similar to a business, administration degree, except for the fact that we live in a fishbowl in the public sector, and salaries are available to public information and all kinds of things. So everything we do is under a microscope. Eventually, there are certain items that we can, certain business we can conduct in closed session, but that all eventually comes to light as well. If it's a contract that we're trying to negotiate with a real estate contract, for example, we can have that meeting and that conversation in a closed session, but ultimately it gets,
when the deal's made, it becomes public.
It becomes public. So yeah, I mean, we don't have anything to hide, and that's, again, kind of what I like about it too, is our motives are out there for everybody to see. So
open government, open communication is a big goal.
Absolutely.
Like to have. Well, I know the city of Joplin has obviously been focused on a lot of the rebuilding from the tornado, and you were here at the time as assistant city manager, so you've been there all along through these steps, and I think people might be interested in your feelings as we are, ending to 2014, what we've accomplished in the last few years.
It's funny, started about 7 weeks before the tornado hit, and afterwards, I remember going down to the Emergency Operations Center, and the city manager had heard, hey, we're having some issues with some volunteers out at Missouri Southern. Can you go out and check that? Because I had, again, when I worked in St. Peter's, I had about 4 years of volunteer management experience, and so he said, hey, go out there and fix the problem. I said, sure, I'd be happy to. Where's Missouri Southern?
You hadn't been in town long enough to find out where we were.
I had no idea really where a lot of the stuff was, and so, finally, he said, figure it out. So, all right, it's somewhere north of town, so take range line and follow the signs. And so ended up out here and met some representatives from AmeriCorps who had already been on scene at that point, and looking at some of the smaller Head Start buses, and there were maybe 1 or 2 of them in front of the Student Center, and walked up to a gentleman, who was manning a clipboard and had a line of volunteers behind him, and it just went up and said, hey, what's going on? Is there anything we can do to help you? I'm work for the city, you don't know me at all. He's like, well, we're running into an issue with buses. We don't have enough transportation to get people back in there to help. And so knowing our transportation coordinator, Robert Lawley, knowing he had contact with the school district and knowing that the school district wasn't going to be able to,
they weren't using their buses.
Right, yeah, so he was able to put me in touch with Dave Pettit over there at Joplin Schools, and within probably a half hour we had 10 or 15 of those larger buses, to be able to roll in. So kind of the ability to see a problem and kind of find the solution for it through the people and relationships that you have, I think that's been our most successful element, I think, of our recovery is we have some disaster experience with, with the blizzard earlier that year,
different storms
the ice storms in 2008 or 2009, whenever those were. I mean, so we've had that experience, certainly not on the scale that we had in 2011. But talking to our emergency management director, Keith Stammer, he said relationships were key. He knew exactly what was happening and who was doing what because he'd had those conversations with the Red Cross, with the Salvation Army, with all of these charitable groups. He didn't have to worry and scramble to find resources because he knew those were being taken care of. So, the city's role in that recovery initially was just, cleanup. We had 68 days, to get as much of that debris cleaned up as we possibly could. Well, it's certainly challenging, but that was the easy part. The long-term struggle, I think, is in the recovery. So you do the cleanup, the initial phase. We were quite successful at that, and then the recovery comes, and it's having those planning meetings and figuring out what the plan is, getting a lot of money from the federal and state governments to help implement those programs. So how do you spend those within their guidelines and be able to carry out the projects that are going to benefit the residents the most 20, 50, 100 years from now.
So would you say that's the phase we're at now, is you have these recovery plans, but you still are, the implementation takes a number of steps.
Yeah, I mean, we hired a master developer in 2012 and asked them to help us kind of develop that master plan on what we wanted to accomplish. So they developed a list of projects, and in 2013 they helped assemble some land for those projects that we knew we were going to need at some point. Went out and found some revenue sources for that. I wish we maybe would have taken a little bit more time on the planning side. I think we perhaps rushed that a little bit.
You wanted to get something written down in the books.
I wanted to get everything kind of going so we could move forward. But I think we were somewhat the victims of our own success because we were so successful with the initial cleanup that we kind of built that expectation into our residents' minds that the rest of that process would take as long. But I mean, the administrators that we've hired through Deloitte, one of the gentlemen in particular, I was having a conversation with him, and he said, Greensburg and whenever they had their EF5 several years ago, and all these other communities that have taken so long to recover, that's the norm. I mean, it just takes a long time to be able to put that plan together and then start to see construction. So, we're in that stage right now, probably, and still in the early stages of the planning of that. We received $45 million in the first round of disaster funding through HUD, $113 million in the second round of funding, and to date we've maybe spent $8 or $9 million of that, because we know that we have to take the time to spend that money properly up front and do the design work and do the engineering and then move forward with construction whenever the time's right to do so.
You think that's sometimes a public perception? They hear those dollar amounts and they think, well, Joplin's got this big pot of money, why don't they start spending it? But you have to go through certain steps in order to spend it.
Absolutely. I mean, CDBG dollars that are given out by the Housing and Urban Development, for example, they're to benefit low to moderate income people. So whatever program you propose has to benefit that core group of residents in one way, shape, or another. So they have certain criteria that you have to hit on a project. And then once you're able to feel comfortable that your project meets those guidelines, then you can start asking, for them to allocate that money to you, and then you can do the design work, and then you can do the construction.
So somebody's definitely overseeing everything you're doing
Absolutely.
At the federal level and state level.
No, they check closely. Every federal agency has an Office of Inspector General that within it that doesn't report to the head or within the division. I mean, they report right to the head of that agency, and they're the auditors that go in and they check all the books and make sure that the money's being spent properly, that all the rules are being followed. Most recent and probably best example of that is the senior housing project that we talked about. We had again, lack of experience, I think, on disaster and working on a project of that scale, but just the scale of our disaster itself. We had some challenges there that we identified in the middle of the process. I mean, things were moving along pretty well until we kind of saw this one red flag that was kind of waving out there, and it was a procurement issue. It wasn't anything that Wallace Pajali or their co-development partner did wrong. It wasn't anything that the city had done wrong, because we didn't
hadn't encountered that before, right?
We hadn't encountered it before, exactly. So it was a matter of, hey, here's an issue that we need to maybe hit the pause button on and evaluate. And it took a while to get that response put together, but I think in the end it saved the city $4.5 million, because if we would have spent that money and the auditors would have come in at some point and said, yeah, you spent that money incorrectly or didn't follow these procedures, where's our $4.5 million?
We gave you the money, you didn't do
if we spent it all, where are we going to come up with it? And then that puts the city in a huge financial risk to have to pay that money back. So I'd rather do things right than do them quickly. And
so that project is still in the works. It's just you're taking a step back before you proceed again.
We've pretty much hit the reset button on that one. So in our council meeting on Monday night, they terminated all the agreements that we had with Wallace Pajali and their co-development partner. And then probably early next year we'll put that project out for bid, and then we'll follow all the steps and make sure that they go. And
follow the steps as you go along.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a project that we've heard a lot about involving the library, and people might be curious, how is the city able to proceed as you're already looking at, design and so forth for that project? So maybe an explanation of how that went.
That was another project through a grant that we received through the Economic Development Administration. I think our Wallace Pajali, our partner on that, was able to initially identify that resource for us. So the original concept was to have a consolidated movie theater and library project. Couldn't quite make that work for numbers, so we had to separate those two projects. So the city's moving forward with the library piece of that. We have RFPs out on the street now for architects to come in and actually help us with the design of that and develop a budget. We received about $20 million in EDA funds. We're matching that with about $5 million of TIF funding to be able to build that project and complete it out. And then our master developer, Wallace Pajali, is working on the theater component side on the east side of that property. So we've got RFPs out on the street for the architects, and hopefully early December, late December, maybe early January, we'll have that architect selected, and then be able to start having those public sessions, where we're engaging the residents to see what do you want in the library. And we have certainly our ideas, and EDA has their ideas, but they're a good partner with us on this project as well. And so hopefully, I don't want to give any timelines on when we'll break ground. We just need to let that process play out.
And that's probably the toughest thing, is people want to get dates. They want to say, well, give me a date when I'll see something.
And that's that's typically development processes. It can take months or years, to get to the stage where a building even comes up out of the ground. So again, because we live in a fishbowl and our processes are so transparent, a lot of people see that as a delay or just slowness of how government operates, but there's a method to our madness, and so we don't want to, like I said, we don't want to misuse those dollars that are given to us, and so we have to be careful with how we spend them.
So there's a lot of possibilities as we continue to look for the future and those things that are coming.
Absolutely.
Yep. And of course, the city has other projects that are ongoing. You have funds that help with road improvement and so forth. We're recording this program. People are aware of construction on 26th Street, that part of town. And those are projects that have been underway for a while as well.
Yeah. Federal Highway Administration has a TIGER program, which basically helps communities with infrastructure projects. So we identified the 26th Street widening, the 20th Street overpass, a few other projects that we're able to use that federal funding source. We're in partnership with the Missouri Department of Transportation, because they're typically the agency that receives those funds from the federal government, and then we work with both of those agencies to expend those dollars. So yeah, we've got a lot of projects. 26th Street is the one that everybody seems to be talking about. And if something could go wrong on a road project, it's gone wrong on this one.
Everything from the soil you're building on to the
soft soil to, just last weekend we found out, a contractor called us and said, yeah, there are a couple of underground storage tanks sitting in the intersection of 26th and McClellan. It's like,
didn't even know they were there.
Didn't even know they were there. So, you have to hit the brakes on that, because, what's in those tanks? Is it fuel that could potentially be contaminating the soil? So we had to call EPA in and have them do some tests on that. And I think we just recently got some clearance to get going on that project, and hopefully here before too long, in the next few days, we'll have the asphalt crews out there.
So even though we're in the fall-ish season, you can still do that kind of work and get those roads completed.
Yeah, talking to our public works director and our operations manager, they said as long as it's 40 degrees or right around 40 degrees and temperatures are rising, they can lay asphalt. So hopefully the asphalt plant stays open long enough to be able to get the crews out there, but I think we're real close.
Close to having that done. And you mentioned the 20th Street overpass. That's something that this winter season, even though it's winter, we'll still see some progress in starting on that project.
Yeah, absolutely. We've gone through, gotten all the contracts signed, waiting on the railroad, I think, for one more piece of information. The agreements have all been agreed to, so they just need to sign those and get us back to us, and we'll be able to issue the notice to proceed on that. And that'll involve some road closures at some point, right. So there will be some impact of traffic, but that's probably a 2-year project. From start to finish.
To finish that whole project,
yeah,
right.
That road won't be closed for 2 years. We'll be able to do partial, leave 1 or 2 lanes open.
One lane on this side, one lane on that side, whatever it takes.
Again, yeah, it'll be an inconvenience for our residents, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a project that's well worth it. Not only from just a residential perspective of having neighbors that live along that railroad track, not having to listen to that horn blow, to students who need to go to school and aren't being blocked by a train. Public safety wise, police and fire will be able to respond more quickly to incidents in that area because we won't have to wait on
the train either as you're tying that together.
Yep.
Well, you mentioned the city and the financial aspect. I know this year the city council talked, and there's some concern about the tight aspects of the city budget.
Most city governments run lean anyway, so we never have enough staff to be able to meet the needs of our residents, and that's because we're limited by the amount of revenue that we generate, whether through sales taxes or other revenue sources. So prioritization, I think, is important and key to determine what is it that our residents want most out of their tax dollars, and then what do we need to do as an organization to make sure that we're meeting those needs. So we had a pretty tight budget this year that we presented to council and they approved. November 1st is when our fiscal year starts, so we were able to get that budget passed, but we saw some issues long term that could potentially derail us on some levels, and so we wanted to be careful with how we started spending our money this year because it could have an impact 5 years from now.
You have to look down the road all the time when you're doing things like budgeting and planning and so forth.
Yeah,
and you have a number of projects that are, as you mentioned, sales tax based. The city of Joplin depends on people coming to our community.
We are a retail community. Yeah, their property taxes, by and large, go to the school district to fund their operations, and sales taxes are our biggest contributor to our revenues, and so people who come and shop,
There's a big, the metro area is bringing people that help provide the services for the rest of the community.
We're somewhat unique in that we have a community that has a nighttime population of 50,000 people, but during the day we get up to 250,000 people in the city, and they're either shopping or they're working. So we're definitely a unique situation, but it's been a good one.
Good one for the city. Now, we talked about communications earlier. I know you have a website, and the citizens can find out a lot of information. Is that one of the means you encourage people to find out what's happening through the city?
Yeah, absolutely. We have the ability, they can go on and they can sign up to be notified for different things. So if there's a council meeting agenda that we publish, we can send an email or a text out to them. The Joplin Engaged feature of our website, so if you go on the home page, there are 3 tabs kind of there, and one of them is engagement, I think right up there at the top.
At the very top as they're scrolling through the screen.
Yep, right in the middle. So you can click on that 3rd tab on the right, and you can report concerns. So if there's a pothole again or a street light that's out, you can go on our website and notify us of that. But there's a lot of information out on the website, and websites are generally clunky. Websites aren't as simple as they could or should be.
It can be very involved if you try to look for something.
There's a lot of information because there's a lot going on, frankly, and so you have to kind of know where to find the information. But we do have the option and the feature through our website provider to be able to sign up for text or email alerts whenever something is. If a resident's interested in what's going on at the airport, they can sign up to get notices whenever we publish information to the airport. Facebook, we use that quite a bit to push information out. We have a city Twitter. Actually, we have a Twitter account, and I've got a Twitter account now. So, I try to get out there and communicate with residents as best as we can to let them know what's going on. But, people can always pick up the phone and call City Hall if they have a question or a concern, and we'll get them to the right person.
And is Joplin the size of a community where people aren't afraid to pick up the call?
No, they're not afraid to pick up the call. No, had speaking to a resident earlier today, actually, about 26th Street, and spent about 10 minutes, explaining to him just some of the problems that we ran into on that project. But that's what we're here to do. We're here to serve them and like I said, help them live their lives with as minimal intrusion from us as we can. So.
Right. Well, how would you then, and with that in mind, how would you summarize the goals for city government in Joplin? What would you like to say are the goals for Joplin?
That's probably a question you should ask the city council. They're the ones who are elected by the residents to make those value decisions on what priorities we need to have, and my role as city manager is to lead the organization internally to help accomplish those goals. So, to use an analogy, they're kind of the navigators of the boat, and
right.
I'm making sure that we have all the rows, all the oars rowing in the right direction and in sync with each other to get there as quickly and as best we can. So, I'm probably speaking to a colleague of mine who's been in the business for 20 years and 20 plus years in the same city. He said, you know what, council members have the right to make bad decisions, but they should never make uninformed decisions. And so, I see my role as to provide them with as much information as we possibly can for them to make those decisions that are going to affect the residents. But I certainly have goals within the organization on how to improve our delivery of service to our residents and how we react and interact with them and engage with them. So there will be some changes along those lines. But all the decisions, that's what our council members get paid.
That's why they're elected to those spots, right?
And they get $5 a meeting to make those decisions. So I certainly have a great deal of respect for them, but also have a great deal of respect for our staff. They're just, they work so hard, and I would put any group of public sector employees up against any group of private sector employees, and we'd run circles around them in terms of work productivity and just the ability to do things.
To accomplish. Very proud of your staff and your
Absolutely,
city. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Sam, I'd like to thank you very much for visiting with us, providing some information for the audience. And
My pleasure.
once again, we showed the website for the city, and if people have questions, they can follow up with you.
They can call me at City Hall, 417-624-0820. My direct extension is 205. So.
All right.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much.
That's great.
And
Thanks,
I'd like to, you're welcome. And I'd like to thank the viewers for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on this station. We'll see you then.